Good morning. Welcome everyone that's joined the webinar. My name is Andy Bradley from Delta Energy and Environment. I'll be facilitating the webinar today. We have a lot of people signed up for the webinar today, so I can see people still joining the call. But I think we'll start the webinar now. I know a number of you have been on the line for the last 5 or 10 minutes or so. So we're planning that the webinar today will certainly be no more than 40 minutes. We know how busy everyone is. We'll try and keep it to at least below 40 minutes and as close to 30 minutes as we can. In terms of going forward, you'll see on your right-hand side a dialog box on your screen. There is a chat feature on that dialog box. So during the webinar, you can submit comments or questions to us. They will only come to the organisers of the webinar, but please feel free to submit questions to us. It's unlikely we'll be able to handle all of the questions or many of the questions today, but certainly we welcome those questions and feedback, and we will certainly come back to individuals afterwards. So please do make use of that chat feature. In terms of the presenters today on the webinar, alongside myself, Andy Bradley, I'm the director at Delta, been in the industry about 30 years, the energy industry about 30 years, and 8 years with Delta in the new energy sector. I'd like to allow Patrick to introduce himself. Patrick, would you like to give a short introduction?
Yes, hi, good morning everyone. So I'm Patrick Clarence, I'm Secretary General of EMMES, which is the European Association for Storage of Energy. I'm lobbying in Brussels since 15 years now, and I'm always busy in the energy and environment sector. But my background is legal background, so I'm not the technician.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Valts?
Yeah, so my name is Valts Grintals. Been active in the energy storage space now for almost 3 years, coming from an electrical engineering background, have been managing the energy storage research at Delta for now as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Valts. A short introduction from each of us. So Patrick is in his Brussels office, and Valts and myself are in a rather cool and grey and snowy Edinburgh this morning. So in terms of the presentation today, the agenda for the presentation is shown on your screen now. We'd like to do some brief introductions on EMMES and Delta. I know many people on the line today are clients of us or members of EMMES, but there are many people who aren't familiar perhaps with our organisation. So we'll do a brief introduction and then explain about what the EMMES report is, why we've done it and how we've gone about it. And then we'll work through some of the headlines and conclusions from our first report, which we published shortly before Christmas. So moving forward in terms of introductions, Patrick, would you like to give a short summary of an introduction to EMMES?
Yes. So EMMES is, as I said, the European Association for Storage of Energy. As such, EMMES is completely agnostic regarding technologies, and our main aim is to build the legal framework and to make the business case for energy storage. Our members obviously also have a lot of knowledge and information about what's going on EU level. They network between each other, and this helps them to build their own products and maybe offerings. We are now 7 years old. We comprise the whole chain of energy storage. So we have research centers, we have companies building, how should I say, basic materials, and also equipment suppliers. We have utilities, distribution system operators, and also transmission system operators. So it's the whole sector which is aligned in the association.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Patrick, for the short introduction. I'll do the same for Delta now. For those that aren't familiar with us, we're a research consulting company focusing very much on new energy, and our mission is to help our clients navigate this transformation of the energy system that's occurring from this old system of centralized generation, typically carbon intensive, about commodity, about meter points where the value is upstream, to one where the value is increasingly on the downstream side. It's becoming increasingly about services and customers. Of course, it's moving to a low carbon system, but also one that's very distributed. So that fundamental transformation that's happening in the energy system is the focus for our work and our mission to help our clients through that transformation. In terms of our expertise, we cover a wide range of markets and technologies, often on the customer side of the meter. So a lot of the topics you see there highlighted in the main bubble on that chart, from microgeneration through to highly efficient heating systems in buildings, into connectivity in buildings, building energy management, and electric vehicles. And you can see that energy storage is at the heart of this ecosystem and has a fundamental facilitating role within this transformation that is happening. We do a lot of work for network operators as well, because our insight and knowledge on the customer side of the meter is becoming increasingly valuable for these types of stakeholder. In terms of the clients that we work with, you can see here some example companies that we've worked with, from energy suppliers, manufacturers, technology developers. We work with controls companies, with industry associations, policy makers, and investors. We actually have a very strong relationship with many Japanese companies and are very active in the Japanese market, which itself is going through a fundamental restructuring at the moment. And specifically for this audience today, I'd like to highlight our flexibility and storage research. I won't go into detail today, but you can see a link on the slide here where there's lots more information. There's 4 key components of our research. There's a market info base, a competitor info base, and alongside that we produce in-depth reports on both energy storage and behind-the-meter flexibility topics. So lots more information available on our website for those that aren't familiar with that. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce our companies, our organisations to you. Now I'd like to just briefly explain what the European Market Monitor on Energy Storage is, shortened to EMMES. We're developing this report to become the definitive analysis of the European markets for energy storage. It's a collaboration between ourselves and EMMES, and it's based on primary research with leading companies and stakeholders, many of whom will be members of EMMES, the industry association. We'll be updating the report every 6 months, so we've published the report now in December 2017, and we'll be publishing the next edition in June 2018. And there are 3 main objectives of this report. Firstly, to provide a common set of data, market and policy information that all industry stakeholders can rely on and use for their internal purposes, but also to support external discussions. Secondly, to establish an accepted evidence base to support the debate with policymakers and shapers in the sector. But obviously, thirdly, to help save members resources, time and effort to stay abreast of the market developments. So we very much hope that we can add to what you may be doing internally, and certainly I think we can bring a perspective that is difficult for any single company to achieve on its own. So the current report's available to all members of EMMES, subscribers of our own research at Delta, but for non-members it is available to purchase for €3,000. We'll be sharing some highlights from the report over the next few minutes, but anybody on the line today who's a non-member who doesn't have access, please get in touch with me or with Brittany at EMMES if you would like to discuss purchasing the report. So in terms of what it is, just summarised on this slide, the questions that we're focusing on within the report, looking at the country markets, the trends we see in those markets, which segments are the best opportunity, how is policy developing. So it's the key drivers that are shaping the way the market's developing. And towards the bottom, you can see the summary of the main sections of the report, looking at policy, looking at each country or region in some detail for each sector, so residential, commercial and industry and front of meter sectors we look at individually. And we provide a forecast for 2018. What we're going to do going forward, we've started looking at the thermal storage market in this report, and we'll be expanding on that in future editions. So here's the table of contents from the report, just to briefly show you. So if you purchase the report, you get a 40+ page report covering these countries and regions, along with the data in each of those markets. So a very quick run through of the report, an introduction to our organisations, and now we'd like to share with you just the main headline that's come from the research that we've done regarding how the market has developed, the EU market has developed in 2017, and our outlook for 2018. So Vouts, if I may hand over to you to just talk through the next slide.
Thanks, Andy. So really the main headline from our research is that the growth of the market in 2017 is expected to be at least 50%, which shows the continuing of the strong growth seen in 2016. This growth has come primarily on the back of the front of the meter segment. However, behind the meter segment, so C&I and residential, have also shown significant growth based on new business models in the market, as well as decreasing costs for the energy storage. Beyond 2017, we expect the market to that the market will continue to grow in 2018, but at a slightly slower rate, and this will primarily be impacted by the fact that we expect a slower uptake of front-of-the-meter projects across Europe. But front-of-the-meter will still continue to account for a largest share of deployed electrical storage in short term. In longer term, we can see that behind the meter is starting to catch up and is likely to overtake the capacity coming in front of the meter. And to give you an overview of the policy side of things, I'll hand it over to Patrick.
So thank you, Vouts. Patrick, would now like to just sort of pass over to you to talk about the policy side, and perhaps to start with, focusing on the status of current policy. How is energy storage established in the existing legal framework from your perspective?
So if you look at the slide, I think it makes very clear that energy storage until now has not been seen as a core element of the energy system. Historically, we're coming from a centralized energy system, and the centralized energy system was tailored to the reality on the ground, meaning that it's big centralized plants, and they are then just using in the network codes, in the business cases, so any regulation, the electricity directives, and so on. It is only using the existing frameworks, centralized focused. And now we have to include in the future policies the added values that energy storage can bring to the system, but also consider the specificities that energy storage has in the system, meaning limited reservoirs, which is a new challenge. So for the moment, what we see is that there's no definition of energy storage. There is no network code dealing with energy storage. Every member state or some member states develop products for specifically energy storage. In other member states, the network products are just the ones which exist for all the players and do not remunerate faster reacting devices or more accurate devices for their added service to the system. They just remunerate them the same as slower or less accurate devices. So this is something which needs to change, and one of the main activities for EASE where we work on.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Interested to hear you mention there about no definition for energy storage. How important do you think it is to get a good definition for energy storage?
If you consider the specificities of energy storage, and if you create a specific framework around energy storage, you need to know what energy storage is. Because if you, and I will give an example what this means. If you would consider that energy storage is not a final consumer, because you store the energy and you give it back to the system, which unfortunately is not considered like this in many member states. Most of the member states consider energy storage to be a consuming activity, energy consuming activities, and it's taxed. Energy storage devices are taxed for the charging of their devices as a consumer. And then when it's sold to the final consumer is taxed again as consumption. So there's something wrong. It's either the laws of physics which are wrong, because you can consume 1 kilowatt hour only once, but you tax it twice, or it's the laws of the parliament which are wrong. I didn't figure out which one it is. So if you would allow that it's only taxed once as energy storage, then you need to know what energy storage is. And this is just one of the examples. So if you don't define it, you will not create investment security.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. And then looking forward to 2018, the clean energy package is clearly under discussion in EU institutions. How do you see energy storage being treated in that package?
There are 9 legislative proposals on the table. And if you look at these difference, and we picked out only 3 of them where energy storage is relevant. It's an electricity directive, a regulation, and a renewable energy directive. The difference between a directive and a regulation is that the regulation is applied directly in all member states, so all the topics or the parts which needs to be exactly the same in all member states are in a regulation, and the directive is a document which is then transposed into national law by each member state. So you have 27 or 28 national laws for this electricity directive later on, which allows for slight changes. So for all the important stuff, it's the regulation. Just for an explanation of this terminology, for the ones who are not so familiar with this. What is mainly changing and what we see is that these electricity directive and regulation do take into consideration the storage specificities. So for the first time, we see clear proposals for energy storage. I will not go in all of these proposals, but maybe one of the main points which we said before is that energy storage is considered now as a full element of the system. So it's a definition of energy storage. The Commission asked to develop a network code on energy storage. Everywhere in the text, when we talk about balancing the system, or when we talk about regulating the system, or when we talk about national codes or EU level codes, it is mentioned that everyone may participate. It's a man-side response, but also energy storage should be allowed to participate in all these specificities. One of the challenges, though, for the moment is that not everything is included. The question of power to gas, how will this be treated? Will the gases which would come from wind or renewable energy be considered green hydrogen, and therefore would there be a possibility to have this as a renewable fuel, or is it maybe different?
Okay.
The last point maybe is a challenge which is still ongoing. We made a workshop on energy storage funding or investment in energy storage, and in there we saw that long-term contracts and a revenue is something, or visibility on the revenue is something which is very important for investors. But the actual draft of these Clean Energy for Europeans package foresees that the system services must be purchased as near to real time as possible, not more than 1 day in advance. So if I want to provide system services in the actual version, I would have to bid on the market every day. And knowing that the prices for the technology goes down, I need to be sure about my business case. So this is something we're working on to try to get long-term contracts accepted in these documents.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. I mean, in terms of the coming year, I mean, which of the changes do you think will be most positive for energy storage? When you look at all of the things that may happen, is there 1 or 2 things that you would highlight as being particularly positive if they come about for energy storage?
Yes, the main points I mentioned before, it's the fact that energy storage is now allowed to participate explicitly everywhere, and that the products, so one provision says clearly that the system operators must consider the specificities of energy storage when deriving products for their markets. Mm-hmm. So there is a clear support and visibility for storage. Okay. Obviously, the definition and request from the Commission that energy storage should not be unfairly taxed or charged.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And on the counterpoint, is there anything that worries you in terms of the policy that could be negative for storage?
I mean, that's what I said. It's the long-term contracts which we're working on.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it's a question about the ownership is still open. Will a regulated entity be allowed to own energy storage devices or not? So there are some points which are still under discussion.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Patrick, for the quick summary. Quite a few questions have been coming in, and perhaps it would be a good moment. A few questions around how we define energy storage, and does it include pumped hydro, for example? Fouts, would you like to clarify
Yeah, of course. So it's actually as part of here in the presentation, coming back to the report, we looked at 8 regions across Europe, looked at really all energy storage technologies, excluding pumped hydro in this instance. So this included also thermal storage, which at this point we've looked at separately, because we're still looking for the best way to make battery energy storage comparable with thermal storage, or what's the best way to make them comparable. And really coming back to the regions, looked at the 8 regions across Europe and split it up into 3 segments, looking at the residential segment, the CNI segment, and front of the meter segment. In addition to that, as I mentioned previously, we look at thermal storage separately. We also have a more detailed overview of the EU policy and the future changes we foresee.
Okay, Vance, if I can just hold you there for a second, because I think there's another question come in. I mean, this is the focus of the EMMES research that we've done. So we're looking holistically across different energy storage technologies, with explicitly not including pumped hydro. But there's a question come in, Patrick, that perhaps I could refer to you regarding the added value of the EMMES report and research compared to what EES already does. Because I'm aware EES already provides a lot of updates through its membership and different sources of information on projects around the world, or particularly in Europe. So perhaps from your perspective, would you like to comment on how you see the EMMES report adding to what EES already does?
Okay, there are 2 questions which I would like to address. First of all, the question about the definition, because this was one of the questions. And in there, the question is, how is energy storage defined? Only electrical or also thermal? So the definition which was put forward by the Commission, and which we supported very much, reads: energy storage means, in the electricity system, so we're talking about the electricity system, deferring an amount of electricity that was generated to the moment of use, either as final energy or converted into another energy carrier. So it means basically the definition of energy storage says, as long, for the electricity system at least, as long as you take electricity in, you can take out any kind of other energy carrier. It can be heat, it can be cold, it can be a gas, it can be mechanical energy, whatever it is. It's another energy carrier, another form. So this is the reply to one of those questions which have been asked. And this is also then the report, and what we're looking at is we're not looking only at batteries, we're also looking at some other storage to some extent as it's possible. Regarding the difference between the EMMES report and what EES is doing. EES provides for its members every month a very comprehensive newsletter about what's going on energy storage. In there we have the latest information about projects, the latest information about regulation, the latest things which go around the world, everything which is published. But we do not have an analysis on how the member states behave, on how the market for energy storage is evolving. We don't have historical data, and we don't give information about maybe some drivers why storage in one specific member state is more behind the meter. Let's say in Germany you have subsidies for behind the meter, and why in other member states you find it more on grid scale, because maybe they have a specific product for fast reacting devices on the grid scale. So all this information which is addressed in the EMMES is not available via EES reports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Patrick, for answering that. I mean, from the Delta's perspective, we've been doing this type of research for the best part of 15 years now. And I think one of the key things that we bring as a research consulting company is that we focus across the new energy space. So storage is just one of the technologies that we look at in our research, so we can really place it within a proper landscape that's emerging around the energy system. So I think there are some clear added values from the EMMES report. But thank you for the question. So we should move forward now with the presentation. So Valts, perhaps I could ask you just to share some of the extracts from the analysis you've done on the three segments: residential, commercial, and industrial and front of meter. So just share some headlines.
Yep. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Patrick. Really useful insight in terms of the benefits of the report and what the report actually shows. I'll talk in bit more detail about the specific segments. I'll start with residential, which is one of the more interesting segments in Europe. We see uniform and strong growth in this market across the more established regions as well as new country markets. So starting with the obvious, Germany is leading the way in Europe with the estimated number of systems installed exceeding 30,000 units in 2017 from our expectations, and really leading the way and showing examples for other markets in Europe. Additionally, Italy and UK have shown significant growth from 2016 to 2017, especially Italy, where we saw 74% growth in the annual uptake of residential energy storage. In UK, this was 61%. And in both markets, they've had different drivers. In UK, it's been primarily the fact that there's new business models in the market from players that customers recognize, which has grown the awareness about residential energy storage and its benefits. And in Italy, the market has been driven similarly to Germany a few years ago, driven by subsidies, by policy, as well as some new business models entering this market. Beyond these three bigger markets, other markets are also emerging, interestingly with fundamentally different drivers, which in the three markets I mentioned previously, they have been driven by obviously subsidies as well as the fact that there is a existing rooftop PV market. But these emerging markets like Nordics, Republic of Ireland, and Eastern Europe have drivers like higher EV uptake, which in some cases incentivizes people to consider buying also energy storage, greener thinking, as well as the customers wanting to be more energy independent. And additionally, the new business models bit coming from the more established markets being replicated early on in these markets play a role in driving the interest in the residential energy storage space. Last but not least, for residential space, we also looked at thermal storage. In this instance, specifically looking at hot water tanks in Europe, and obviously there's a significant capacity available to use for thermal energy storage. Our estimate shows that it's around 10 gigawatt hours in Europe, with France being the biggest market for this, followed by UK and Germany. So really there is a significant capacity to be able to play around with providing services to the network in the residential segment.
Okay, thanks, Val. Just one question. There's quite a few questions, so I'll just pick one or two. But a question here about Italy. You know, in Italy, is there a development for subsidies and policies for storage, or is it for renewable energy?
So specifically for storage, there are regional subsidies available for residential energy storage in the Lombardy region, and I know that there's talks about expanding this to other regions in Italy because it's been quite successful. So this is really the key driver for residential energy storage. Obviously, when we will get on to other segments like front of the meter and CNI, there's a few other changes regarding the potential to provide network services in Italy with energy storage, which again is signaling that this will have positive impact and it will incentivize bigger scale battery uptake in Italy as well.
Okay, thank you. So should we move on to commercial and industrial sector?
Yeah, of course. Going on to commercial and industrial, really it's a smaller market in Europe, still becoming established, with two main markets at the moment leading the way in terms of new business models and trying to bottom out the key customer segments to target with this, which are UK and Germany. And really there are, as you can see from the graphic here, the interesting segments are emerging here. So there's the understanding of water and waste treatment, retail, industrial processes, and food and drink processing customers as the more interesting ones for CNI scale energy storage. And these customers are already being targeted with storage as a service offering from few players. Obviously, it's still in early stages, and really it's trying to replicate what's been happening in California and US in the past, but it really signals that the market will take off, and really companies are trying to build upon their knowledge within this space. Additionally, Central and Eastern Europe actually, so a few countries in Central and Eastern Europe are presenting an interesting opportunity for CNI energy storage in the near future. At the moment, obviously, the market is relatively small. If you look at UK and Germany, both of the markets are around 20 megawatt hours of battery storage installed annually at this point, while Central and Eastern Europe is only 1 megawatt hour. However, there's a lot of indicators that show that this will grow. Primarily the fact that there's growing energy costs for CNI customers across the board, especially in Poland. Additionally, energy efficiency incentives are in place in Czech Republic as well as Poland, which will play a role in customers uptaking energy storage, as well as power supply issues playing a role in this. And lastly, really data centers is an important segment to look at, specifically in Nordics, as in the market, looking at recent facts, over the past 3 years, approximately 3.3 billion euros have been invested in data center development, and this will continue to grow. So there's obviously a significant number of data centers that need UPS, needs technologies for UPS applications, and that's where energy storage can come in. There's already announcements of companies offering energy storage solutions that can offer both self-consumption as well as UPS. So really it's indicating that there will be growth in this segment in Nordics, specifically from the data center perspective. And then going on to front of the meter segment, the biggest segment for energy storage at the moment, which, as you can see from the title, is driven by very country-specific factors and project. So it's a volatile market driven by individual countries. You can see from the map really the key countries there, and as well as the capacities being quite significant. So 2017, big growth, went to around 400 megawatt hours. However, the 2018 number we see is slightly lower, and that's because we see that really the markets that have been leading, which are Germany, UK, Italy, and France, have kind of reached the point where the specific drivers for those markets, which are usually single values or single grid values or certain grid constraints, have been solved at these capacities, so there's really no need to install additional capacity. And however, there's obviously two markets specifically that we see still will help in kind of keeping this market at high capacities, which is Nordics and Eastern Europe. There's a few projects that have been announced in Nordics, as well as Eastern Europe, again, specifically Poland and Czech Republic, again, mentioned here, as well as CNI segment. So really the Poland, Czech Republic, two markets to look at, and maybe two markets that people haven't been looking at as much in the past. As for technologies, lithium-ion really is the dominating technology for this segment, if you take away pumped hydro, but other technologies will play a bigger role in specific size segments, especially as there is a need for longer duration storage in the future. We see that happening. Yeah, and from the map here, from the colors, you can see that we've broken down the markets by different driving factors for installing grid scale energy storage. So UK, France, and Italy have been the three markets that have been really driven by ancillary services markets. So EFR in the UK, PCR in Germany, and the Turner project in Italy. Additionally, France has been, I think, a good example of a market that has been driven by islanded grids or installations on islands to solve certain issues around the power quality and the electricity availability on the islands. And lastly, renewable energy integration is something that will play a bigger role for energy storage in the future, especially for a longer duration. A good example already there is Spain with few projects, specifically solid batteries, which obviously provide long duration solution to the network.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks, Val. So thank you for the questions. We won't possibly be able to answer them all today, but we will come back to people for questions we haven't answered. But there's an interesting question here about, which market do you think is most dynamic? Is perhaps the best opportunity in 2018 in the residential space and the CNI space in the front of meter space? If you had to pick one market as being the most interesting to look at, Vals, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think for residential as well as actually front of the meter, Italy is the market to look at. From a residential perspective, obviously the growth has been significant. The economics look very good in Italy, very similar to Germany, or even better depending on the location.
Okay.
Front of the meter, again, there have been changes to the regulatory framework for the grid services, how grid services are procured in Italy, and these changes really take into account or look at basically making energy storage more competitive solution for providing these services. So you could see similar scenarios to UK and Germany with kind of big upticks of energy storage.
Okay.
As for CNI, it's more complicated to narrow down to one market. Again, UK and Germany will be interesting to look at as more business models emerge. I think Nordics will be very interesting to see as a market where maybe energy storage is being used as more of a UPS solution, so not really connected to the network. But obviously there's an interesting case there as well.
Okay, thank you, Val. So I'm conscious of time. Perhaps in the last couple of minutes, just to summarise the presentation and come back on one or two points about the EMMES research. One or two questions about how we did the work for this report. Delta has a very extensive industry network across many markets and technologies which we've developed since we were established in 2004. So a key aspect of all of our work, but particularly this research, is primary research with companies active in the field. So we've done a lot of stakeholder interviews and questions, and we pick up lots of information and have done for many years in this space. So we use our own internal knowledge and databases, and we add to that a lot of primary research, and obviously all of the secondary sources that are available in the market generally, we incorporate those and synthesize those within our work. So the primary research is the key aspect of this work. One or two people have asked about getting the slides. Yes, absolutely. We'd be happy to share the slides with you. If you'd like a copy of the slides, then email myself or Brittany at EASE. You see our email addresses on the screen currently. And perhaps just one question that's come up, Patrick, maybe I could ask you. I don't want to send you a curveball, but a couple of people have asked about Brexit, which is a topic very close to my heart here in Edinburgh. And does that in any way, do you have any view on whether Brexit would have any impact on the way the European storage market might develop over the next year or so?
So this is a very tricky question, and normally I would use my crystal ball, but I broke it recently, so I'm not able to use it. I will have to look at the market as such. If you analyze it, the UK is, given the geographic position and the interconnectors available, way more advanced in the needs for storage compared to the continental Europe. So the activities done in the UK will always be more advanced than on the European continent, and Europe will catch up with these needs later on. So we saw in the UK the specific products for enhanced frequency reserve. We saw that there is a deeper look into the ownership of storage and who may buy services or who may render which services. And so this is always a good lesson, a front runner on European level. If the UK leaves the EU and is not participating anymore, which is not clear as today, in the European processes, then it can be that that the drive or the experimentation of new storage technologies will fall on Ireland or other larger islands where they have similar needs. So I don't think that the overall EU activities on energy storage will be hampered by this. It will be a loss, but I believe that others will continue if the UK, in the case the UK would really leave and stop participating in EU activities. But I do not believe that the latter will apply. I believe that the UK will stay active in Europe, also for purely factual reason and interconnection reason, electrical dependency which we have between the continent and the UK.
Absolutely, and thank you, Patrick, for your view. I have to say I agree with you. There are laws of physics that won't change regardless of what happens with Brexit. So I'd really like to conclude the webinar now. Thank everyone for their time. The vast majority of people have stuck through the presentation to the end, which we really appreciate your attention. I hope we've managed to communicate to you and show you, demonstrate the work we've done and the value that EMMES study could bring to your organisation. It's going to be, it's become an increasingly robust and established source of data that the industry will be able to refer to and use for the internal planning and decision making, but also to use with external stakeholders. We'd be delighted for the non-members on the call today to purchase the report. It's available now, so please do contact myself or Brittany at EASE if you're interested in discussing that. All the questions that have been submitted, we will go through those and we will try and come back to you individually. Thank you, Patrick, for your time today and contribution. We've enjoyed working with EASE so far and look forward to developing and deepening our partnership over the next years. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good day and appreciate your time.